this one that I'm about to do for you now, this is kind of a global historical snapshot in the form of music. And so to begin this song, we're going to the Middle East. All right, so we're going to start in the Middle East at a place known as the Fertile Crescent with a group of ancient people called the Mesopotamians. And so it was here that the Tigris and Euphrates rivers flooded on the same schedule every year in the ancient world. And so what that meant is that the Mesopotamian farmers could harness those flood waters for the purposes of irrigating their crops. And when they started doing this, crop yields increased dramatically. Now, this is going to have sort of a domino effect of progress on civilization, because with those increased crop yields, they started generating a surplus of grain, and this meant that not everyone had to be a farmer anymore, and then so cities started being created, okay? And one day, those Mesopotamian farmers decided to play scientist with that surplus grain that they produced. And so they found out that if they fermented it, you know where this is going, thereby inventing beer, it would have an intoxicating effect when consumed. And this, to them, seemed like a good antidote to the tedium of digging irrigation ditches in the hot sun all day long. You know, so by my lights, civilization begins with a drinking song. Some things never change, you know. But anyway, so, you know, those Mesopotamians, they did a bunch of stuff. They gave us like the first codified code of laws, first organized system of writing, and in the midst of all this, in their spare time, they even played checkers. But we're going to stick with beer right now. We're going to look at beer and 5 other notable drinks, and how the creation of those drinks coincided with key historical events. This is a song with sort of an unlikely frame. It's called A History of the World in 6 Glasses. And I wrote this initially for high school sophomores, for world history students, but I think it will play just fine to, let me look around, to a room full of like millennials, some Gen Xers, a smattering of boomers. Here we go. In the Fertile Crescent, 6000 BC, some hard-working farmers dug an irrigation ditch. They got done, wiped their brow, and said it's tough here. So they fermented their grain and drank till they were in a stitch. Now the world had beer. But I'd like to take you on to southern Europe, there in the Mediterranean. I'll tell you what happened next. The Greeks, they were having a big time at the symposium they had, philosophy and sex. It was all fueled by wine. And ain't it strange to think of all the history that's been shaped by drinks? In the early modern world, Western Europeans took to the sea and brought Africans thousands of miles to cut sugar in the tropical sun, exchanged for copper bowls and some textiles. Slaves made a global drink called rum. While in the Arab world, liquid was put on trial because of how hyper its consumers would get. And King Charles feared this drink would bring on plots. When Java stations came, they were like some early internet. You get news and lied to in coffee shops. And ain't it strange to think of all the history that's been shaped by drinks? Now by the dawn of the 18th century, the Royal Society was drinking tea. In 100 years it'd be, and enjoyed through the empire by everyone. To meet a man, they'd make it with filler, like sawdust and sheep dung poop. An American quack named Dr. Pemberton made a soft drink his factories worked toward interchangeable parts. America led as the world globalized its ways. That's what put Coca-Cola in everyone's hearts. Now it's the world's second most known phrase. Anyone want to hazard a guess what the most known phrase worldwide is? You're disqualified. What do you think? Any guesses? It's okay. I mean, that's the phrase, okay. It takes a big sip to quench a mean thirst, but won't you give a thought to history first? And ain't it strange to think of all the history that's been shaped by drinks?